Hey yo, welcome back to the channel. I'm Duran with DuranSupply.com, where I help you design smarter, not harder. Fonts are like food for us designers, and we're always on the search for that cool new font. But here's something that I've noticed and I'm sure that you could relate to. I have a font library of over 1,000 fonts, but when I look back on all the projects that I've done over the years, there's only about like 5 to 10 fonts that I really stick to. So sure, it's good to have those extravagant fonts and those cool new trendy fonts for when you need them, but it's even more important to have those solid powerhouse fonts for all the rest of the time. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of my favorite powerhouse fonts, some of the most reliable fonts that you probably already have in your library. So let's get to it. This first font right here has been with me through thick and thin, and I'm sure it's been there for all of us. Now there's some haters out there, but this has got to be just the most versatile font of all time, Helvetica. I actually get mad at how good this font is sometimes because for some projects I'm searching through like thousands of different fonts in my library, and the only one that looks good is this like default font. Let's check out some of the stuff I've done with Helvetica over the years. This is a poster I did for my collaboration with Eighth Wonder. Sometimes all you need is a very simple, bold font, and that's where Helvetica comes in. This right here is probably Helvetica Black, which I absolutely love the look of in all lowercase. And when you bring in the kerning or tracking really close on the letters, it's just so delicious, man. This is an example where Helvetica is clearly the front-facing font, the bold headlining font. And here's another example where that's the case. It's this artwork I did in commemoration of the album Dirt from Alice in Chains, one of my favorite albums of all time, probably my favorite album of all time. So this may look like a bunch of different fonts, but it's actually all Helvetica. It's just different weights, and some are stretched out more than others. Like I said, sometimes you just need a simple, bold font, and you can play around with that to your liking to get some cool results, especially with Helvetica. You see as I stretched it here and use different weights to kind of get that contrast in. So not only does Helvetica Black here work as a main bold-faced font, but it also works well as the supporting font. And of course, one of my favorite things to do with Helvetica is actually just to stretch it out. Maybe that's the anti-design in me, but I just love it, dude. It was definitely really fun and a little bit of a challenge to play with Helvetica on this design to get all this contrast out of one font, and a sans serif font at that. So it's a little hard to give it personality sometimes, but when you pair it with just the right graphic or a certain type of effect like grunge or ink bleed or whatever, it becomes the absolute perfect font. Before y'all get on my ass, no, I don't care that there's a difference between font and typeface. I don't even know what the difference is. I don't care. Here's another quick example since the other two had Helvetica as the sort of headlining font. So this is my Salvation artwork that I did, I think back in 2021, sort of as a homage to Terminator Salvation, which is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. And that movie actually gets a lot of hate because people only say that the only good Terminators are Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. But if you really watch Terminator Salvation, it is one of the most interesting of the Terminator films. But anyway, whenever I need some body font or supporting font to something bold or something more interesting and dynamic, I just go for Helvetica. So as you can see here, it also works pretty outstandingly as a supporting font. There's honestly not much better in this world than doing some ink bleed on Helvetica. This is actually genuinely how it feels to do ink bleed on Helvetica. Okay, let's take a look at font number 2, Futura or Futura. I don't know how to pronounce this. This is honestly probably the greatest font of all time. One of the most versatile for sure, and definitely one of the most recognizable. This thing is killer. You ever see one of those old vintage Nike ads? They're using Futura, and it has spawned a whole trend of Futura-filled vintage ad type posters, which I absolutely love because it's just so good and it works every time. If I'm not mistaken, also, this was the first font in space. Don't quote me on that, but I think I read it somewhere. Let's check out how I like to use it. This is one of my favorite posters I've ever done. I did this for Hard Jewelry as part of their ad campaign for, I think it was their 6-year anniversary. But yeah, one of my favorite things to do with Futura, besides just using it for a bold title, is to throw a wildcard in there. For example, on this graphic, I replaced the H with the H from Hard Jewelry's logo just to spice it up a bit, and this whole thing just rocks. Futura already has a lot of personality on its own despite being a sans serif font, but when you throw in some cool graphics or another interesting piece of type or logo or symbolism in there, it just takes it to a whole another level. So the Futura on this just brings it all together, and it's like slapping you in the face with how bold and sexy it is. I think this is one of the most popular posters I've ever done, and I think half the reason for that is just Futura being the amazing powerhouse font that it is. This is another fun example where I throw in some cool symbolism and tie that in with Futura. So this was a poster that I did for my metallic waste clothing drop, and one of the items that I dropped was a pendant, and that is actually the symbol or logo that I used on the pendant. You can obviously see that on the poster, so I thought that was really cool, and brought a whole other type of flair to the poster along with Futura. Here's another great example. I actually did a whole tutorial on this. If you want to check that out, I did the whole layout and whatever for this vintage Nike style poster, and of course I had to use Futura. Again, just the perfect bold font in my opinion. It's simple, but it's got just enough character to pop out at you. And here's one last example of this font in all its glory. So yeah, Futura rocks, and you'd be absolutely mistaken if you don't have this in your library. Okay, and finally, font number 3, Garamond. I had to throw a serif in here at some point, and this is the serif of all serifs. It has stood the test of time, and this may be the best serif font in all of mankind, or at least it's my personal favorite. This font has absolutely held me down throughout the years, and you know it because you've seen it on all those really cool vintage Apple posters that we all drool over. I had an entire phase with those, and you're gonna see that in these examples. It's like a cheat code for instant vintage. Here's some stuff that I made with it. This is one of my all-time favorite artworks. This was also my profile pic for a while too, if you remember that red ball. But anyway, this is your brain. This may be one of the most simple designs that I've ever done. It's literally just a red ball with some type under it, but it was also one of my most popular and best-selling, and I have to thank Garamond for being just the absolute perfect font for this. Despite the simplicity of the composition, Garamond really helps to give it that vintage feel, and I think it really piques your interest when you look at this. So I actually have this t-shirt in my closet. Let me go get that. Here we are. All right, look at that. Beautiful. So if it wasn't obvious, this is a 2-part graphic. I'm using Garamond on both sides of the graphic. So this is the back of that. Again, it's really reminiscent of those vintage Apple posters, which I'm extremely inspired by. It's just beautiful, guys, and whenever I make a vintage looking design, I can hear this font calling to me and talking to me from the font panel, like the Green Goblin mask. I also used it on this design for my collaboration with Eighth Wonder, and this one's a little more stylized. Again, it's got that vintage look, brings the whole thing together, just so sexy. And here's one more example. This is actually one of my favorite artworks that I've ever done. Bite the Apple, clearly a bit of a reference to Apple, so using Garamond was just obvious here. This is pretty much my go-to serif font when I'm making a vintage-inspired design and I want to pair it with a cool one-liner or piece of copy. It just works so well every time, extremely reliable. I love it. Okay, and that's it for my top 3, but I'm not going to end this list without some honorable mentions. These are in no particular order. So we got Dharma Gothic. Dharma Gothic for me is just the definition of a powerhouse font. It's got so many different weights and variations. So if you're looking for that tall, bold font, this is the one. We got Compacta, another super bold and just solid font. I'm bringing it back to this example of Helvetica that I showed with the Salvation artwork that I did. So the headlining font here is actually Compacta. It's one of the best bold and heavy fonts out there. Definitely a go-to, especially when you pair it with a nice supporting font like Helvetica. And lastly, we've got New Spirit, which I personally don't use that much because it's a bit friendlier than most of my artworks are. But every time I see this on someone else's work, I'm like, hell yeah. So here's some stuff that my friends have made with this font. Really cool if you're looking for a friendly and also bold serif font. And that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this list. Let me know what your personal favorite reliable fonts are down in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I post videos like this every week, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.